Hello and welcome to the Crux of Medtech. We go beyond the buzzwords, bringing you the insights from the innovators, investors, and leaders who are driving this life-saving space forward. Because I'm absolutely fascinated by the stories that people have to tell in medtech. As someone who works in this sector on a daily basis, I come across so many interesting people and so many interesting stories that I think the world deserves to know about. Welcome to the Crux of Medtech.
Hello, Tom, and welcome to the show.
Hey, Henry, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm very good. Don't usually get asked that one, so yeah, all good. How are you?
I'm great. It's my morning. It's your afternoon, I think, but you look like you have a lot of energy for this conversation.
I think so. I always have the energy for these conversations and excited to dive into it. So, before we get into where you're at right now, always like to give a bit of context as to how you got to where you got to. So, how did you first join the medtech industry? What's your kind of story and entrance point from the start?
Yeah, I had been in several other technology companies outside of medical device, just kind of learning as I went. I was mostly in the marketing, business development side of things. And I was with an imaging company in the United States where we were building up ourselves organically, but we were also interested to sell the company. And so I became involved relatively early in my career with the CEO and other senior managers to package our company, put it on the market, and to eventually sell it. And with that experience came the opportunity to then manage the transition. We sold the company to Kodak, a number of years ago. So that was quite a bit of a learning experience to take a small company and then somehow fit it into a larger company with all of its rules and whatnot. About a year or so later, I was recruited from my previous CEO to go and work for my first medical device business. This company made a transformative medical device product that saw inside of your GI tract, without any tethers, without any cables, et cetera. But so think of a pill cam, like groundbreaking technology, right? And from there, I learned about how to, develop a market within a medical device space, which is somewhat different. It applies, different rules apply to it. We also bought, 4 companies, rolled them in, also integrated them pretty well. And then eventually we sold that company to another medical device business once we, had built up both organically and inorganically. So that's how I cut my teeth on the medical device space. Since then, I've been had the opportunity to run a robotic exoskeleton company, so quite different than GI imaging, as a comparison. And now I'm at another groundbreaking medical device business that's making a very unique imaging platform for interventional cardiology. And I say it's groundbreaking because while pill cams were, just new, compared to endoscopes and things like that, we're groundbreaking in a different way here at Conavi Medical. We have taken 2 existing imaging modalities, realized that they have strengths but weaknesses. And when we put them together, all we have are just the strengths. So the market knows what they look like. But they have never seen them together before, but I think that they can quickly understand the benefits of that. So anyway, long-winded answer to how did I get started. I actually got to where I am right now as well.
No, absolutely. So we're going to dive into Conavi a little bit later. But you obviously were technology first and then moved into medical, but you've then stayed within medical. What's kind of kept you here? Is it just because the opportunities arose and you wanted to stay there, or is it like was there something deeper than that?
Certainly having connection to what we do in the medical space matters. I always believe that we are a mission-driven sort of management team. We were when I had my robotic exoskeleton company too. We existed in the ecosystem where the Apples and the Facebooks and the Googles all had their engineers being recruited, but we retain our engineers because we were mission-driven. I would say the same thing at Conavi. We've got technology and we've got a bunch of technologists roaming the halls over here. But it's really that connection to patients. And I would say over 10 years ago, my dad had a pretty significant heart event. I saw him struggle through, the urgent care and then also the recovery. And I don't think he had the best tools of the day, right? No. And so when I had this opportunity to join this company, I knew from that experience the unmet need, and I'm very happy to be a part of this company to kind of fill that unmet need.
Very cool. So let's talk about that unmet needs. Let's dive into the Conavi story. So how did you get to join Conavi? What was the story there? Were you recruited into it, or did you seek out the company? How did you become involved?
Yeah, so I was recruited. Conavi today is a Toronto-based company. I'm a United States citizen, and they ran a search in the U.S. for a CEO. And I think that my credentials probably are that I can go into founder-led businesses, technology, clinical leadership, and they've done a really great job of raising money and founding a team and getting started. My MO has tended to be to go in alongside of them and just kind of help their work, be better. And I think we've done that here at Conavi. We've revamped the management team. We've raised some money, and we started 3 years ago on a next generation product development that is coming at the most amazing time at this stage in the market, actually. So that's how I got started with this.
Awesome. So what is the unmet clinical need that you guys are solving?
Yeah, so there are 4 million angiographies done each year to steer interventions within the cardiovascular space, in the coronary space. So 4 million of these procedures, all of them are guided by an angiography, which I think your audience will know as, a pretty rudimentary X-ray taken from outside of the body. Yeah, the resolution's gotten better, et cetera, but it is still, an X-ray. And that is guided therapy, but it's also limited the type of applications that these doctors could perform. For that reason, intravascular ultrasound, I sometimes call it IVUS, or OCT, that's short for optical coherence tomography. That's a lot of words all at one time, I know, but ultrasound and optical laser beams. These two things were developed separately from each other to take a look inside of the blood vessel to help guide even more complex procedures, but they exist separately from each other. So it turns out that ultrasound, we all know what an ultrasound picture looks like. It is relatively grainy, and if you were to sharpen it, it would limit the depth of penetration, which isn't so helpful when the doctor needs to measure the inside of the blood vessel and size stents. So ultrasound excels in those sort of procedures. But because it does not have the fine degree of resolution, OCT does a better job that way. So they have their strengths and they also have their blind spots. The practical part of this is that doctors will only use one imaging catheter during an intervention. They'll start with ultrasound and they'll have to finish, or they'll start with OCT and they'll have to finish that way. And there's the trade-offs. So our founders recognized that problem or that opportunity, some time ago. And there was a bit of an arms race, which we won. We got to the point where we figured out a way to not just combine them, but combine them into the same form factor, the same size of catheter that the standalone or single modality catheters have. And we're pricing it right where single modality is priced. So we have the best of both modalities in the same catheter for whatever a doctor sees. And they don't even have to make a pricing decision. It's going to be the same that they're spending on ultrasound or OCT.
Interesting. So how have you guys managed to do it at the same price point? Was the previous technologies where you just get one of the world's just completely ridiculously high margins, or have you managed to bring manufacturing costs down? How have you managed to keep the price the same?
Yeah, and I want to be clear that we are still on a bit of a path to get COGS to be identical or similar to where standalone IVUS or OCT is. But at volume, at end of curve, when you resolve supply chains and all sorts of things, low cost area of manufacturing, at the end of the day, adding the OCT laser beam and the associated imaging processing stuff, at the end of curve, that is negligible relative to the price of an IVUS system. So that's why we have that range of motion. Now, our initial strategy is to be price neutral in this razor blade model that we've got. But there is an opportunity once we, can have everybody identify that extra value that we're creating to maybe achieve some premium pricing at some point in time.
Interesting. Okay. So What does this actually enable then? So what does it enable for the patient? What's the kind of clinical outcomes that this is improving or adding to?
Yeah, I want to talk about just imaging in general, whether it is ultrasound or optical or ours. The market has received hundreds of millions of dollars in the form of clinical trials and other market development investments over the last 10 years or so. And we're still in this period of time over the last couple of years where we're getting the readout of all those clinical trials. In 2024, 22 of these trials were summarized in a Lancet article, a meta-analysis, and basically said is, if you use imaging of one variety or the other, you can save on the likelihood of your patient dying post-procedure by 46%. So typically what we worry about in the medical device space is like a 5% improvement in X or a 10% improvement or Y. When you have a 46% reduction in the main, variable, which is, does your patient live or die? That's quite extraordinary. We can reduce stent thrombosis by 52%. These are big numbers, right? These clinical trials have led the guidelines improvement both in the United States and in Europe just in the last year. So now patients are under a class 1A guideline for certain characteristics. And that just further favors the adoption of imaging. Okay, so we help to satisfy that. And you ask about our value proposition. A hospital that's installing a new catheter lab, they can buy our system, and it essentially behaves like two systems. They get two for the price of one, if you want to think about it like that. Sometimes they have doctors who are IVUS fans or ultrasound fans, and some that are OCT fans. Quickly, what we have seen in our when we have deployed our first generation in the market is that if you have a favorability for one or the other, you quickly realize the power of both, because we make interpretations easier. We reduce the ambiguity, and some of the doctors tell us that they can act more quickly and more efficiently as well. Okay. At the end of the day, so that's, very basic, as you can save by buying one and getting two systems, more interpretation. There's certain procedures like complex disease, which we're seeing an awful lot more of all over the globe because of our aging society. By the time somebody presents with symptoms, there can be a lot of stuff going on in that heart. So you'll want to have ultrasound and optical imaging to be able to address anything that you see during that case.
Okay, super interesting, super interesting.
I'm interrupting this episode to bring you a word from our sponsors, TTP. TTP is a leader in complex medical technology development with deep scientific and engineering expertise. They support ambitious medtech companies in solving high-risk, high-complexity challenges where there's no margin for error. Whether you're tackling uncharted technical territory or racing to bring a product to market, TTP provide clarity and direction. By de-risking innovation and ensuring seamless alignment with regulatory and manufacturing demands, TTP help you move forward with speed and confidence. To find out more, check out the show notes.
Okay, so commercial rollout is happening of this next gen. You've got one product on the market so far, and the next gen is in the pipeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had version 1. It took us a while to kind of perfect that enough to go and test the value proposition. We tested it in 7 leading heart hospitals in the US and 1 in Canada. Learned an awful lot, and it helped to inform our next generation product. We're not marketing the first generation right now. We're saving our powder for the launch of our next gen. But the great news is that 3 years ago, we started out on this development. It's finished now. We've just had our pre-sub meeting with the FDA that we're excited about. And we are seeking to launch here in Q3 2025. So that is a 510K application. And besides filing a pre-sub and having a meeting with the FDA, which reduces our risk, the predicate device for our product is our first generation product. So we feel like that also encourages us that it's going to be a straightforward review, and we've already had that relationship with the FDA.
Okay, awesome. So you've come into this company when it was the founding team, and you say your MO is to come in and support founders when it's a founder-led business and get them to the next stage. So it turns it from a team that are founders and have done a great job so far, but take them to that next stage. So what do you most typically see when you step into these companies as the start? What are the kind of traits they have? And then what kind of journey do you need to take the founders on to get them to be more of a business rather than a project, if you will excuse that terminology?
Look, I've never been the innovator or the person that had the breakthrough. And so there's a high degree of appreciation for what they did. They ignored conventional wisdom, or they moved faster than the big strategic to, get to the IP before the strategic could get to it, et cetera. So a high degree of regard for that. I think that one of the traits that I see is because they've had that peskiness to kind of break through, there is a sense that, they've already achieved, they've already succeeded, right? We built it, the market will come. This is obviously better than X, Y, and Z in the marketplace. So sometimes that means that there's been a lack of activation energy to get that market development stuff going. Sometimes early teams are great for the breakthrough, but they're not built or don't have the experience. Maybe the recent knowledge of how to go and market into the marketplace, et cetera. So those are the sort of things that I can help identify and then recruit accordingly or coach up accordingly, right? Sometimes early stage businesses have an overemphasis on a project that isn't the main project, and it's sucking sort of the resource, from what they really need to do to kind of break through in the launch. So those are just some of the things that I notice and we try to correct when we get into a business.
Okay, awesome. And so with that early stage market development work, what stage is the right time to start doing market development, and what are the key things to have a successful market development before launch?
Yeah, so market development really, in my opinion, maybe that's because I'm a lifelong marketer, I think it should exist kind of in parallel with our R&D, right? Again, we were founded by an interventional cardiologist, so they knew the market from a user perspective, which, kind of shortcuts some of that. But as you develop that product further, you want to make sure that you're not just basing this on an N of one, perspective. So this is the other thing, Henry, like early stage companies fall in love with the early adopters. We fall in love with the KOLs, and, the KOLs are there and they're very helpful to give you feedback, but they're also relatively unique creatures. They forgive a lot of the sins of early stage products that the later adopters will not forgive. They will not forgive those sort of sins. So there's also an over-reliance on too few opinions about whether this product is appropriate or not. So I believe that market development should take place earlier on so that you can have the right thing when you finally, develop your first version or two, I should say.
Okay, excellent. And being a Canadian business coming to the US, and I guess that's why you're hired as a US CEO to kind of launch it in the US and take a Canadian technology and launch it in the biggest healthcare market or biggest opportunity. So, how has that kind of journey and transition been? Is there kind of traits a Canadian company has which you needed to kind of build up to get that US launch right and kind of prepare for? Has there been anything that you've had to do to try and get the credibility almost from a Canadian company coming to the US? Because I feel like it's sometimes forgotten, the Canadian organization.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that while I'm a U.S. Citizen, I will say that I don't think we ever start a business just thinking about the U.S. market only, though it is a large market and it's a good proof point. But I think we are thinking globally. We have a relevant product that we know that intravascular ultrasound and OCT are already popular in Japan, and they have favorable reimbursement. We see reimbursement improving all over the globe. So we're going to go and launch first into the U.S. and then we'll broaden globally. So I think that is, that's our mentality. Now, I think you're asking a question is, what about the Canadian business? And is it different than other businesses? I will say that it's been perfect to found a company here in Toronto. I didn't found it here, but the technical capability here in the local ecosystem is incredible for what we needed to do. All right. Now, because our first main market is going to be in the States, our commercial effort's going to be very US centric. And we're going to be manufacturing our next generation product for phase 1 in the United States as well. We co-designed our product with some excellent partners in Minneapolis, and they will help us manufacture the first versions of it. So I think that it's tremendously complementary. I think that the biggest challenge that I have as the CEO is that we've just been relatively quiet. And some people are maybe not so knowledgeable about what's happening up in Canada with regard to business in technical development of next generation stuff. So that's my job, is to get the word out, I think.
Fair enough. Just to kind of point on that Canada piece. So one of the podcasts that's just released is with a guy from company called Perimeter Medical Imaging AI, which also do an OCT technology, different value proposition and different use case. But that is also a Canadian based business. I think it's also Toronto. So, kind of maybe there's a few links there between these two businesses, but, yeah, there's some really strong technology coming out of Canada in terms of technology development, and then obviously the US markets. They've also hired a US based CEO to then bring it to market and get it into the hands of the users, because it's the biggest opportunity and geographically so close. So just a point of relevance there. Great technology coming out of Canada at the moment, and interesting.
Yeah, on that point, Henry, I just wanted to tell your audience. While we're a Canadian company and we're traded on the TSXV, we completed a financing round in April, and our lead investor and the core of the investment, 75% or more, came from the United States. So we have done a decent job, at least recently, raising our hand to say, hey, you should take a look at this technology. We think we're going to be pretty important, and we got that attention. So we're going to continue to water those seeds as well.
Awesome. And you did mention a point there about being listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So I think, to your point, you have been quite quiet as a company, Conavi, until more recently hearing more things about it. But I think the first time I came across Conavi was when you guys made an acquisition of the assets of a surgical robotics company called Titan Medical. Can you just tell us a little bit more about why you guys took that decision and what that has enabled you guys to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I want to, just remind everybody up front. So we did acquire Titan Medical's assets, but we're not going to operate that company. Okay. So why do we do this? So we were a private company up until September, October of last year. And we were raising money in the private marketplaces, as a lot of small medical device businesses were. But we were approached by Titan Medical. They were running a process because they had IP, some cash, and a trading symbol, but they didn't have an active business. So they were trying to find somebody to take over that shell and consume the cash, et cetera. So they ran a process. They had 15 companies that they took a look at. We were the ones that won the bake-off, as my CFO says. And so we decided that was a way for us to raise money in a different way. And so we completed that in October of last year. And our first raise was this April raise that I just mentioned, where we were able to find some very supportive investors. We actually went into the market to raise $2 to $5 million, sort of as a starter raise as a public company. And we raised, we ended up raising 20. So exciting for us.
Incredible stuff. What do you think with so you went in for 2 to 5. That's obviously a big jump to get all the way up to 20. Obviously that enables more growth commercially and you to do more with the business. But why was there such interest? Because there's a lot of cool technologies out there who can't raise 2 to 5, or who go to raise 20 million and then can only raise 10. So what is it about Conavi that's so unique? How did you sell that story? What is the story that got them over the line? And why is there such interest?
The main, I'll talk about the interest part, but then also talk about how we evaluate it with regard to risk. But the interest part, we had medical doctors on the investment teams looking at us. They asked all the KOLs that we had, spent hours on the phone with them, and they came away believing that not only was there an unmet need that for a market that's developed, but that we really do have the right product to fill that unmet need. So now they talk about risk. Is there market risk? Well, hundreds of millions of dollars, 22 randomized controlled trials showing that your device does something important in the marketplace. That's great. Technology risk. If you were to talk to me 2 years ago, we had a lot of worries about, how do we get the technology ready, the next generation technology ready? We've now retired all that risk. We've done the design verification testing and all that stuff. And we've had preliminary discussions with the FDA about what they're interested in seeing. So all that technical risk feels like it's low. So then they evaluated regulatory risk. Because we've done a pre-sub, because we are our own predicate device, they felt like that risk was low. So what remained for them, and they wanted to help us solve that, is the capital risk. And so, all right, 2 to 5, you'll be raising money all year long. If we went in with, X, and you could raise X more and we'll help you do that, that will set you up for that. So, one of the things as a CEO that I love is to have such great interface with our investors so that they know what our challenges are. They realize that they can help us with those challenges at, the right time. So that's the kind of relationship we're trying to build with our investors.
No, absolutely. And did it take a particularly forward-thinking investor to kind of put that on the table of the 20 million, or were you kind of we could do this with more and this is what we could enable? Who had the idea to kind of push and actually go for a larger round?
I would think that I think that it was that main investor that said so. We don't want you and the management team distracted with frequent raises in this first year. So the money is not necessarily what we're not trying to say is that we got more than what we needed. That's not the case. We got more, let's say, established up front, but we'll need that to get through launch, right? The other thing, you bring up the Titan Medical thing. One of the benefits that we have besides being able to raise money in the public markets is that they have IP for their surgical robotic products. Okay. And we inherited all of that. We also inherited their net operating losses as well. So since we've had that portfolio, we've been approached by other companies saying, hey, this is really interesting to us because Intuitive Surgical is launching a new single port robot line, et cetera. And in order to be competitive, other companies need to, have a view to that IP, either defensively or offensively. They're also working robots that we have inherited too. So while we're not operating that as a business, there is a potential for non-dilutive financing that's coming from that. And we're running a process to identify that.
Well, that's super exciting. And this podcast started off as a surgical robotics podcast and merged into a medtech so that we could have wider conversations and also fit our own selfish needs of trying to grow the company outside of surgical robotics and some cool technologies. So knew about the Titan story and knew a lot of the team from Titan. So the technology, kind of like you said earlier, having a really good technology, that Titan Medical single port system. There's a lot of very good technologists in surgical robotics that are very bullish on that technology. And it's a lot of people were sad at the time when actually it went away, not just the employees, but people who knew about the company. So it is a very interesting proposition, and hearing some of the ways they got around the intuitive surgical patents is also fascinating to hear. So anyway, kind of to bring it round to a question really, you're running a process at the minute, it sounds like a kind of perfect deal for you, but there were so many surgical robotics companies that could have bought at the time. Why are they now really interested in it versus at the time when you could decide to pick it up for a very different reason? I guess why weren't they interested then and why now? Is there a different price tag? Is there more capability, market conditions? What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so I'm not expert in robotic surgery. So this is coming from the consultants that we've worked with who are, I think, pretty in tune with the marketplace. I think it is fundamentally because hospitals, they will tend to want to, make their investments with trusted partners who can give them a more complete line. And so if you're there as Intuitive and you now have this element that can't necessarily be matched with other strategics or other people who are doing robotic surgery products, there's going to be a catch-up process. Now, the Titan Medical board and management team did a good job of already monetizing the portfolio to some degree in some configurations. But we already know, because of the solicitations that we've received from third parties, that there is other interest. And so we just want to make sure that we round out our view of where all that interest is, right?
Yeah. So you're going to see hopefully Titan Medical's technology rise a bit like a phoenix.
Yes, exactly right. 100%. Yep.
Another quick interruption to tell you about our sponsors, KUKA. KUKA is a global leader in robotics with over 25 years of experience partnering with medtech companies on their journey to market. Their reputation is built on robust technology, reliability, and long-term collaboration. More than a supplier, KUKA provides trusted support throughout the product lifecycle, from development to integration and beyond. For companies exploring robotic solutions, the KUKA LBR Med offers a ready-to-integrate, state-of-the-art option that meets the highest medical standards, without the need to build from scratch. If you want to find out more, then head to the show notes and follow the link to KUKA's website.
Awesome. So to bring it kind of back around to Conavi then, so you guys are coming to market very soon. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be a commercial business in the US and then internationally as well. So I guess, what are you most excited for the next stages with Conavi? What are you most excited to do with the company, and where does your most excited part come from?
Yeah, so mission driven, but we want to help as many people as possible. And to do that, we will start to commercialize ourselves after we get clearance in the first part of 2026. So we'll start to commercialize. We know the first hospitals that we're going into. We know the second wave of hospitals that we want to go into. Ultimately, we probably can help more people because if we sell the company at some point in time. A lot of CEOs will say that's maybe one of their exit plans. The reason why we think that is important in order to reach the most patients is because bundling takes place an awful lot in this area of medical device and other areas of medical device. So there are 10 to 15 large strategic companies that sell a lot of products into the cath lab. Capital and disposables and a lot of other things, services, right? A few of them have image guidance. So, you think of Abbott and Philips and Boston Scientific. They have either IVUS or OCT, but they don't have both. The only one that has both is Conavi. And for all the reasons I mentioned earlier, we think that that's going to be quite important. So some of those technologies are pretty old, right? One of the main products in the marketplace is a 20 megahertz IVUS imager that, is a bit outdated, does a really great job. It's the workhorse, but, could it do a better job if it had OCT on board? So in terms of acquirable companies, we think that there are only two acquirable image guidance companies in the coronary space, and we're one of them. The other one, looks like they're valued higher than we are right now, but they only have an OCT product. So we think that, to your question earlier, Henry, about, what are some of the differences between the Canadian-based company and US-based company? We've been a little bit quiet, and we need to make sure that people know we're there, that we have both IVUS and OCT, simultaneously in our product. And I think we'll start to uncover that value that we have in the company. On the way, perhaps, to a strategic acquisition at some point in time. So I get excited about that, and I also get excited about a lot of the technical heavy lifting is behind us now. So,
absolutely. So you've been through a successful acquisition before when you were leading another company, haven't you?
Yeah. So I was the chief marketing officer at Given Imaging when we were selling to. We eventually sold to Covidian. Medtronic now has that product line, the PillCam product line.
Excellent. So I want to go into that journey and understand your role within getting acquired. So can you talk us through that acquisition journey? From how early did you get involved with the strategics? How much did you open the door up to the strategics? How much do you let them in? Just give us a bit of an indication of kind of the journey, but also the key steps that you guys took to make it an acquirable company.
Yeah. So being on both the acquiring side and the acquired side, it's, similar. If you come to this understanding early enough, you can I think do a better job, but it's about risk reduction, right? It's about, you have to see the value, but you offset that against the risk. So I know that when we eventually bought 4 companies at Given, but we looked at one company 3 or 4 times and they weren't ready for us. We didn't want to buy them. And then when we eventually did, everything was right at that point in time and we outperformed the deal model, right? On the selling side of it, it's the same exact thing. We went and did a wave over the course of 1 year with all of the relevant strategic companies and presented to them. But there was one element of risk that they for some of their checklists that we couldn't surpass yet. We surpassed that in early 2014 when we got an FDA clearance for a particular indication, and that was the last risk reduction on that particular side. So I think that understanding that as you're trying to sell companies, like what is the nature of their value prop, like your company within their portfolio, relative to the risks that they want to make sure is addressed before they acquire you. And if you get a good sense and a good dialogue with that strategic early on, and then you work on the right stuff, right?
Absolutely. And how do you, what's the main drivers and levers for building value into the company? So the idea to get acquired is obviously to help patients, but it's also to maximize value for shareholders, employees, everyone who gets an exit along the way. So what do you think are going to be the key value drivers that you guys need to pull in Conavi to get the maximum valuation when you do eventually come to an exit?
Yeah, I don't want to be naive about this because I know that, as I said earlier, market development and marketing are, they're not like slam dunks. You have to focus on them. But I believe very much in the simplicity of our value proposition, that it's easy to understand, that it's priced the right way, that the clinical evidence supports it, that I feel like we're going to have some really good receptivity. We want to build value to your question, which means that we don't want to limp into an acquisition, right? We're going to go and be sort of single-minded about launching, delighting customers in the early hospitals, expanding accordingly. But I think on the acquisition side, why we think that could happen is that the strategics know the fundamental technologies that are underpinning our technology, right? They're well known and established, so that's an easy thing to digest, I think. So if we'd have enough capital, we're launching, we're getting increased adoption, we'll go at it for as long as we can. We'll start to throw off cash, but I think we'll solve a problem for strategic at some point, I think.
Okay, awesome. And then on the other side of the table, so both of it's about risk reduction. We've said about that, but you've acquired 4 companies and rolled them into Given Imaging. So what makes a successful acquisition? And how do you make sure that transition period is as fluid as possible for both sides of the table?
A lot of pre-work. I think about going and looking at this one company 3 or 4 times. We also looked at another product. We eventually bought a product from Medtronic. We looked at that a couple of times, but when we didn't try to convince ourselves that it would work. We needed to see the math. We needed to see it objectively. So then when the acquisition happened, the thing that we really then focused on was cultural stuff, because all that mechanical stuff we had already talked about, how much the R&D budget was going to need to make that improvement that was necessary. All that stuff was factored in. And that was about the people. How did it mesh with the acquiring company? So we have to be thoughtful about that too. We're a relatively small company relative to Given Imaging. So integration would certainly be quite a little bit more straightforward, I think. But those are the things I would start to think about.
Okay, cool. And so what comes next is the commercialization. Like, how are you guys going to make sure that it's an absolute knockout success? Like, what are the key things you're focused on, and what are you making sure is knocked out of the park?
Yeah, so we're testing. Some of it we supply to the FDA. Some of it is just to further improvement. We're going to build a lot of catheters between now and launch, and we're going into the first few hospitals are ones that use version 1, and they were the doctors who actually really helped us design next gen. So this is the right place for us to go and launch is into these hospitals. There'll be a feedback loop. We'll resolve everything there, and then we'll expand accordingly. So It is, I say it's crawl, walk, run. We don't want to be crawling or walking for too long. We want to run. But these are prudent steps when you have a new technology.
For sure. And kind of to bring the conversation around, what is there anything you want to leave the audience thinking of? Is there anything you want to say about Conavi we haven't discussed yet? And yeah, what are your closing messages to the listener?
So you've heard me talk an awful lot about why I think, we're great. If the audience is interested, and we can even put a link into it, into your comments if you want. But there is an industry paper written from the perspective of doctors, of users. We did not have anything to do with this paper. It was published in a reputable journal, and it assessed image guidance techniques for coronary interventions, the very thing that we're talking about. And it basically replicated what I'm telling you, which is ultrasound is good for some things, but it doesn't do everything well. OCT does these other things well, but doesn't do sizing the lumen or selecting stents as well as IVUS. And the one that they favor the most is combined IVUS OCT, which is the one that we do, that we're the only ones that can do. So that gives me a lot of confidence that the thing that we've just spent years developing is the right match for what the market needs. What I would say to folks is take a look at us. We are, a TSX name today. We're going places. We'll eventually get onto NASDAQ, I'm sure, at some point in time. But stay tuned for some good things.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Tom.
Thank you, Henry. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Crux of Medtech podcast. If you're not already doing so, please go ahead and subscribe on YouTube or follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Crux. Crux is a medtech search firm which places pioneers in transformative roles to help us live longer, healthier lives. We do 3 things for companies. We help hire world-class executive talent. We help companies raise investment from Series A to Series C and execute upon M&A. And we also are building a community of medtech leaders to facilitate peer-to-peer learning and accelerate the companies to help them go faster. If you're interested in any of those 3 things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or follow the link in the show notes to find out more. Thank you.